I'm Chelsea Zaccato.
And I'm Natalie Heacock.
And this is Lumber Slingers.
Each podcast, we will be bringing you relevant and useful industry information, including interviews with top lumber professionals and discussion of current events in the industry.
Whether it be lumber grading, industry and market trends, or who's who in lumber, we hope to extend your current tally on industry knowledge.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Lumber Slingers.
Hello.
Here on day 3 of the Mass Timber Conference.
Yes.
International. I always forget the international at the beginning.
Yes, it's very international.
It
is. Wow, we're beat. It's been a lot in 3 days, but it's been really exciting.
Yes, lots to learn. We're so excited because we have a guest here with us. We're recording actually at the conference, and we're lucky enough to have Dean Lewis with us. Hi, Dean.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so happy to have you. Dean is the Director of Mass Timber and Prefabrication at Skanska. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. And pumped full of timber now, so be ready. 'Cause now it's been 2 or 3 days of it. So
Yeah.
Dean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
yeah, Dean Lewis, located in our Seattle office, but I oversee all of our mass timber projects across the country, and been with Skanska for 2 years. Prior to that, I was at a construction tech startup, and then prior to that was actually at Swinnerton's Mass Timber Group, now Timber Lab, and then before that was a structural engineer with DCI Engineers for almost a decade. So worked with timber for quite a while and have kind of seen it from a lot of different aspects, so feel very fortunate to now be at Skanska and being able to travel the country and see all of our work and work with all of our great people.
Must be interesting going from a startup to such a large company. Very different, huh?
Yeah, that is a good point because a lot of R&D, a lot of what can we do and how are we going to do it, and then it's all of a sudden, okay, now you're on the big stage and, you know, obviously projects like the airport and such. I mean, still a lot of, you know, ingenuity and innovation, but yeah, different from a startup.
Yeah. So you went to WSU?
I did. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs. I'm a Coug.
Nice.
Had to bring it up because, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't come across many. We're in the land of like the ducks and the beeves, you know, so it's nice to see a Coug.
We're all about, you know, the Tallwood Institute and everything that U of O and OSU are doing, but, you know, WSU had one of the first wood engineering labs. Don't forget it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So, yeah. Yep.
Is that up in Pullman?
It's in Pullman.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Still do a lot of testing there, and yeah. Props to all the Dr. Pollock, Dr. Dolan. I'm going to forget people, Dr. Bender. But yeah, some of my first professors in timber engineering.
And that was where you were introduced to mass timber?
That's where I fell in love.
Wow.
So do you still get to like lean on them for anything in your career? I mean, when you're, you know, are they helpful at the school to, if you have questions for testing or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, they're still doing testing. WSU's lab is accredited for seismic testing, which is the Curie protocol, which is not very common amongst most universities. They help with PRG 320 testing. They're on the some of them are still on the PRG 320 board. So yeah, get to interact with them, and it's great.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Skanska.
Yeah, so Skanska, obviously, we're a big company with an international presence in the States. Have over 29 offices. And we kind of break into 3 different business entities. We do civil, and then we have our buildings group, and then we actually do development. And then with that, we also have our sustainability team composed of individuals across the country which do basically sustainability consulting. So we're pretty unique in the aspect that we can actually do our own developments, run those as the GC, but then also we self-perform erection in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, it's a very unique company, but all of our offices operate in their own individual markets, and that's where I like it because I get to work on a lot of unique projects that if I was just in the Pacific Northwest may not get the opportunity. So, yeah.
Where are you headquartered?
Headquartered in Stockholm,
Oh,
Sweden. Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, I never knew that.
Do you get to go?
Not yet.
Not yet?
But maybe soon. And yeah, one other interesting thing is actually Skanska got its grounds in concrete. So actually we're by origin a concrete company. So it's interesting, right, to see a concrete company, obviously with a long history, but now making the investment in timber. So.
It's really neat. Did you see the Iron Workers booth?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love it. It's great to see mass timber and steel and everyone together and trying to figure out the best application.
Yep. All of our buildings are still going to have concrete and steel and timber. It's just we all got to, you know, Michael Green, I think, had a quote where he talks about our buildings just got to be a little bit healthier. You know, you maybe a little bit more salad, a little bit less red meat. Everything's got to work out right. You got to have a nice, a nice meal. So yeah.
Good balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of unique projects, do you have a favorite that you've worked on so far in your career?
Oof, a favorite. The airport's really interesting. I was honored enough to work on that on the temporary engineering bracing when I was at Swinnerton Mass Timber. But then seeing it on the opposite side, obviously coming over to Skanska and dealing with things, when we're closing the building out, which was interesting, and just an honor to work on that project, an amazing landmark project for the community,
Totally.
the nation, the industry. But now we've got a lot of new exciting stuff coming on board. The one that was recently announced was Governor's Island, which is the New York Climate Exchange, just south of Manhattan.
Wow.
The goal is to be the most sustainable building in the world.
Ooh, that's a fun goal.
Yeah, and got a great team out there, but a very challenging project, not just from the timber's one point, but then to have a living building challenge, passive house, and be on an island. That's a whole nother.
A little bit of everything
Yep.
to complicate it.
Yep, so that one's going to be.
Do they know how tall it's going to be yet?
So New York's interesting because it'll be under the new New York 2022 building code, which caps mass timber 85 feet. But it does allow for larger mass timber buildings that were in the code. But it is interesting, and we do have to follow some of the prescriptions that the new Type 4 A, B, and Cs do, with a little bit more robust measures. Yeah.
85 feet's not very big. I think there's some of those in there on the show floor.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
So I think there's been a lot of press around some of the big projects. Obviously, Walmart, we've talked about that before on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing mass timber in Amazon, Google, Microsoft. How is that influencing just, I guess, mass timber in general before we get more specific?
Yeah, I mean, it has been an interesting ride because, before COVID hit, a lot of the tech companies were ramping up, and we were seeing these really big campus projects that were coming online, and, a lot of suppliers' capacity was being spoken for, and then COVID hit. Obviously, a lot of stuff went on pause, and so now we're starting to hear whispers that these companies are starting to come back with these big projects, which is good for the industry because, if a supplier can go from maybe 1 to 2 shifts, which is a huge transformation for them, it means we're going to have more capacity in the States and maybe also help reduce pricing, also stabilize their production, because it's always a worry in construction. Projects push and schedule, things happen like COVID. And so to be able to have like a standard operating procedure to just pump out production for the rest of the year is a good situation for suppliers. But I do worry that domestically, we could be constrained from a supply chain standpoint. So, but it is going to be good for the industry, I think.
I saw this thing earlier this week, and it said, "Can we just live in precedented times instead of always being unprecedented?"
I know. It
Like,
feels
can we just
that.
have some standard supply chain that we're just used to? I mean, is that too much to ask for?
Right.
Yeah. Well, no, not now. We'll see.
Maybe later.
Yeah. So, what are you seeing as your biggest challenge with the supply chain?
I think the interesting part, coming to Skanska and working, most of my career is on the West Coast, and now seeing a lot more on the East Coast, which is really exciting. I would say our backlog now is almost 50-50 in terms of square footage with East Coast, West Coast.
Wow.
So yeah, and with that, I would say the challenge is maybe the project delivery method. So West Coast, maybe more engineer record, taking everything through design, where East Coast is maybe more deferred design. Also different fiber types. So people that may be familiar with what we're using up here, Douglas fir, spruce. On the east, southern yellow pine, but then also northeast, you got the black spruce. So I think that's kind of a challenge sometimes for teams of figuring out what type of fiber they're going to use, because it has different capacities, different supply chain indications. And then just, the overall project delivery and making sure everyone's aware, things like, builder's risk doesn't take 2 weeks to get for a mass timber project. If you got a big, $50+ million project, it's going to take 3 to 6 months to coordinate. So let's get everybody on board first and do that. So those are some of the challenges for sure that we're facing.
How much education are you doing for your customers?
Well,
I guess specifically in mass timber.
I think both internally and externally, our teams, we have projects coming up in new markets. And so for those teams that aren't familiar, it's definitely kind of a got to learn as you go, but we're trying to preemptively get in front of a lot of topics that are critical in the upfront piece. Like, team comes and they got to do a budget, and they're in the early pre-con phase, and just helping them get on board with what suppliers are available, but then also other critical aspects like how much does it cost for water mitigation, and what does that mean? And that's where we kind of draw the client in too, because, make sure they understand, like, this is what our assumptions are. Is this what you want the product to look like? Finishes is another topic that comes up, and so that's a piece, I think, those. And then the builder's risk comes up because, is the owner going to hold the builder's risk, or do they want us to hold it? Those are things where definitely the client engagement and education piece is critical, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
How long would a project, like, say, like the Manhattan project that you guys are doing, from start to finish, from the beginning conversation to actually being done, how long is a typical bigger job, I guess, like that take?
Yeah, I mean, that one's a little bit more complex because of its public nature and the different entities that are involved. I mean, overall, it'll probably be a 3 to 4 year timeline. Construction itself, though, those timber buildings will go up in, 4 to 5 months. So, I mean, it's kind of it's a weird dichotomy, right? You spend a year planning out this work, and then you might build a project in a month.
Wow.
That's weird, right? You're like, oh my gosh, the fun's over. We just got started. Yeah, you're topping out. But that's also a successful project. It's like no call's a good call, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong that happened. Everything goes smooth. And so, yeah.
We toured on Tuesday the Gresham Library.
Oh, yeah.
And did you go on any of the tours?
I wasn't able to this year.
Okay. It was our first time doing the tours, which they were really awesome, but it was really cool to see it. They said that the mass timber went up in
8 weeks? Was it 8 weeks?
No, it was 15 weeks.
15 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's what they said.
Okay.
And it's, from where our background and where we're coming from, we don't get to see that very often or understand kind of timelines and what it looks like. We're more like, when can we get the wood, and
Okay.
versus like how long is the project. And so it's nice. It was neat for us to see that and see how quick it went up.
Yeah. Yeah, the speed is definitely one thing that catches people off guard. I mean, if you're not ready, you're gonna go from the shovel in the ground to topping out and missing the barbecue. And yeah.
What's the fastest project you've ever seen along those same lines?
I would say our recently completed CDHY project in Vancouver. That one, we went through the depths of winter. We were getting about 1.5 inches of rain every week. And we had to do a lot of protection on it that we, coordinated with the team and the client. But yeah, that went up under 4 weeks. I mean, really, the meat of it went up in 3 weeks. And, that's just under 40,000 square feet. So
Oh my gosh.
you're hitting almost 8,000 to 10,000 square feet a week of production.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
yeah.
So when you have a new customer, is it generally the customer coming to you and saying, I want to do a mass timber project? Or is it you saying, hey, have you thought about this?
And it varies. So, but I do get on projects early where a lot of developers now are more aware of mass timber. I would say early days, you definitely were almost surprising them with it. Like, oh, wow, this is a good project, but have you thought about mass timber? Now, what's interesting these days is we see projects come to us and they're almost looking at both options. Or what's really nice is we see projects right out the gate that are mass timber. I would say 6 years ago, we didn't see that. We would have to either vie and kind of stick that option in there, or there was a comparison period where we're comparing against steel or concrete. But yeah, I would say half of the projects now that we're getting are just straight mass timber out of the gate, which is really
Wow.
nice because then you're able to optimize for something that's timber instead of trying to do like hey, we got a 20 by 40 grid for steel. Let's try and do that in timber. It doesn't really work like that. So yeah, it's been better.
It's neat to just see the progression of that, I guess, in general. And even with this conference, Chelsea went 6 years
I
ago.
want to say, yeah, I think I went in 2019, and it was like a fourth of that size on the floor out there, and there weren't very many. I just kind of brushed it off as, I don't know if I need to be at this again, But then I keep hearing about it over these last few years, and I always, we've heard about mass timber in the industry for, gosh, I think we went to a talk in 2016 on it in downtown Portland. It was like the new wave, the new next thing, and so
Yeah.
it has been fun to watch the progression of everybody knows about it now. It's caught on, and before nobody really knew how or what to do with it, and
Yeah.
obviously the earlier companies that were doing it maybe failed a few times. We all learned from that, and then it's been cool to see the evolution of it to become what it is today, and go out there and stand on one of those 84 feet structures and see how far everybody's come. It's really cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the thing that I get excited about too is having our teams come every year. So I think when I was the first time at Skanska, we had maybe 12, 14 people come. Next year, we had almost 20. I mean, this year now, we've got over 32 people here.
Wow.
So it's the biggest investment that we've had thus far. And it's people from all over, from New York, Atlanta, Cincinnati, let alone Portland and Seattle, and LA.
LA. That's awesome.
So the $1 million question, tariffs, and it's interesting. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but we usually only speak to them in regards to lumber. But you have to deal with steel now as well.
Yes.
So you kind of tell us what to do. You've been through it.
Yeah, these are the hottest conversations that we're having with a lot of clients, a lot of customers. Essentially, it's making sure that there's still options out there, especially if a project has a long runway. You know, if you're not going to be committing to a supplier right now, then and we've got time to design ubiquity into it. Meaning, you know, maybe you got a schedule, and maybe you've got different fiber types that are in there, and maybe you've been, you know, you have the sourcing options given your regionality that you can go between different fiber types, which can make the design somewhat challenging. But if the engineer's up for it and the client is on board as a risk mitigation strategy, maybe you got a couple different fiber types that are planned for. Obviously, that puts constraints on the design, and if you have the timeline for it. But I think the interesting thing will be, at least from what we're seeing, is that, you know, steel has gone up. Timber's gone up a little bit, but definitely not as much as the steel has. Because if you got, depending on where you're getting your steel and major structural shapes, a lot of them are not coming from the U.S., depending on where the project's located. So you have 25% tariffs, and then if you look at the steel market, the hot rolled steel's gone up over 30% in the last 5 weeks. So that's over 50% jump, and you know timber hasn't gone up that much. And we know that, you know, steel has fabrication to it as well, but you know the timber's only a portion of the product.
Right.
So it will be interesting to see as the market continues how steel moves relative to timber, because I would be excited if we had a VE session where we're looking at bringing timber back into the building, but that's just me.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Diversification, I guess. I guess you probably have your main constraints are timeline versus cost, would you say, generally in a project?
100%. Yeah, scope, timeline, cost. There's like the three variables, and what's going to be important for the owner. Do they want a locally sourced story? Do they want it to be, you know, the most sustainable building in the world? Or, what's their goal for the project?
Do you feel like in the Pacific Northwest, you more often get this locally sourced, or is that both East and West Coast?
You know, it is becoming a story in the East Coast, which is exciting. I think the 619 Ponce was, to my knowledge, one of the first that kind of publicized it, that they were locally sourced southern yellow pine. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, we got a good wood basket. We're very lucky. So actually, our projects inherently come within 300 to 400 miles, typically, because we have a good supply chain and glulam, CLT, MPP. We got DLT, good options that are local. So we're lucky in the Pacific Northwest, and I think almost inherently we have that story. So yeah.
Are you finding on the East that people are accepting of Southern Yellow Pine CLT? Are they requesting it? And how is that taken off? Because is there one CLT plant in the Southeast, or are they building one?
There's two.
There's two.
Yeah. So Smart Limb and Mercer.
Okay.
Definitely the bigger entities, and more they're talking about coming online. But it's preferential, you know, like some people, it's like the difference between the product types, if it's DLT or MPP, and if you're out on the floor, you saw it, the Ferris brothers are coming up with some new stuff, and
Yeah.
it's all just aesthetics, like what's your
What you want it to look like.
Because I'm biased. Douglas fir is Pacific Northwest, but went down and toured our Kendeda project last year and saw it in person for the first time. I'd seen photos, but seeing it in person, I was like, oh, that's Southern Yellow Pine. I get it.
Yeah.
It is pretty nice. So yeah, I think it's just preference.
Yeah. We saw solder timber on the tour, and it's all radiata pine out of Europe. So, and that was beautiful. It was a lot of knots, really pretty. It would be cool to see how it ages on the outside, but yeah.
But we're kind of like you were. At first, we were like, oh, it's not Doug fir?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, okay, it is still very beautiful. We'll accept it.
Yeah.
They had to bring their roots,
Yeah, they did.
European roots. So
Yep.
Yeah, we would too if we
we
felt that building. So I guess we kind of went over sourcing and whether it's local or how often is it that it's like the Portland airport where it's like down to the stick? Like, that kind of level often, or is it more just like we know it's from this 300-mile radius, or what does that look like?
I would say, last 2 or 3 years, it was kind of the airport was definitely leading the forefront. But now we're actually seeing projects where, they want more specificity. And some of it is just we want the region. We want it with maybe a local tribe or from a local forestry we know about, which just takes more coordination. That's really all it is. But now there's certain entities, like I'm sure you've talked about Cambium and others, that are actually tracing it down to the log. Which is amazing, and that's just part of the technology and the advancement. And so we are seeing projects start to request that as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting just from our perspective. It's hard. It's really hard to get down to the stick, especially when we are out at mills often, and it's not like this section's sectioned off because it came from this part. It all kind of just gets mixed together, and so. Now that it's more of a demand from the consumer, it's coming back up the chain. But at the same time, we have a lot of the new constraints with the EUDR. I don't know how much you know about that, but it's the European Union deforestation regulation where they are requiring that as well. So it's happening kind of at the same time as, the consumer wants it down to the stick. And then now there's other regulations. If you're going to ship into Europe, you have to know the geolocation of where that log came from, and that happens no matter where that lumber is along the supply chain. So even if it's going into a piece of furniture, that furniture maker actually has to trace it back up the chain. And so there's a lot of new technologies coming out that will hopefully make it easier, because right now it's not easy, especially from our perspective in the supply chain. It's challenging.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're gonna have to lace the log with some type of technology that just gets followed all the way through, like a barcode that you can't see or something. I don't know, but some type of technology. I know it'll exist, or it does exist.
But it's exciting. It's just, sometimes the lumber industry gets a bad reputation for being a little old school. And so we need a push to help move us forward and continue sustainable practices. And it's a great renewable resource.
Do you think sometimes that the lumber industry sometimes beats up on itself?
Is this turning into therapy?
Yeah. Yes, I do think that, and Chelsea and I talk about this all the time, how we just haven't been good advocates for ourselves in the lumber industry. And I think that mass timber is changing that for the industry as a whole, even though it's, one piece of kind of what we do and what we see. It's getting such great press, and it's doing such great things and such great projects that hopefully that's trickling into the rest of the industry, and we're all going to benefit from that. So we want to obviously support mass timber as much as we can, because we obviously believe in lumber, believe in timber.
And it drives demand for the other lumber. Not everybody produces CLT and has a CLT plant. And so it helps drive, the demand on our products for other things like the siding and the flooring and the ceiling. Like, people want that. They want to be surrounded by nature. And if there's other components of the job that can use lumber that might not be part of the structure, we've definitely seen a drive in demand on our side of things from that. And so, it's all good if it's all wood.
Wood is good.
Wood is good.
Promoting that biophilia. Did you see that tiny home on the floor?
I did.
That's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny because I've seen like a bunch of different companies come into that space, and I feel like that's just another avenue. Like mass timbers, you see these big commercial buildings, but there's still a lot of opportunity for ADUs and other smaller applications. So yeah, it was awesome.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Although we never got to ask what the siding was made out of.
It looked like cork or something.
Yeah.
Like burnt cork.
Kind of funky.
Yeah.
Yeah, not sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been fantastic, and opening our eyes to a new part of the industry, and hopefully our listeners are going to learn a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean.